Welcome to the European Council, one of the most powerful yet often misunderstood institutions within the European Union. The fact that the name is almost the same as the Council of the EU and the Council of Europe clearly doesn't help this at all. The European Council is the EU institution where you might actually know some of the faces and names, for it is here that the national leaders come together to outline the path forward, manage crises, and set long-term goals. The Council's influence permeates all levels of EU governance and is the beating heart of EU political power. An institution designed to unify, direct, and adapt the Union to an ever-changing world. But, like many things EU, it is also complex and not without criticism. Let's run through the basics of the European Council. Welcome to Ciceroni. Want to help us continue breaking down the complex aspects of the EU? You can easily do so by becoming our patron. Every euro helps us. The European Council is essentially a forum for the national leaders in the EU to come together and find a common way forward. The European Council serves as the strategic guide for the EU. Unlike other EU bodies, it doesn't draft or pass legislation. Instead, it sets the overall political direction and priorities of the Union. Think of it as the institution that charts the course for the EU, making major policy decisions and addressing crises when they arise. It is composed of the heads of state or government from each of the 27 EU member states, along with the President of the European Council and the President of the European Commission. When foreign policy is discussed, the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy also participates. If you are confused by the many presidents in the EU, you are not alone. While most people probably know the President of the European Commission, the European Council also has its own president, which the European Council members elect for a term of 2.5 years, renewable just once. This president is tasked with fostering consensus in the European Council, representing the EU at high-level diplomatic meetings and providing continuity between summits. While the president can shape discussions and outcomes, they cannot vote or directly influence policies. Despite what many people think, the EU generally is very transparent. If you can find your way through the EU websites and you have a lot of time on your hands, you can read the minutes of almost everything that goes on there and even find direct phone numbers and email addresses of most everyone. The meetings of the European Council are the notable exception. They take place behind closed doors. While the final conclusions of meetings are published, what exactly was said and by whom during the meetings remains a secret. So we don't know what happened in all those long hours that our leaders sat together and what deals were made to find consensus. Although this isn't quite as transparent as you might want in an ideal situation, the reality is that the secrecy makes sure that the leaders of the countries can speak freely and negotiate to find a deal that works for all. There is often one reality for the cameras and quite another when in private. Upon arrival to the council building, the national leaders tend to walk past the press, often taking a moment to address their national audiences in one way in public, and just a few meters further on completely transform once they reach the privacy of the council. For example, we have it on good authority that even President Orbán, the most vocal nationalist and contrarian, is known to be a charming, friendly and flexible negotiator as soon as the cameras are gone. Likewise, President Macron speaks almost exclusively English during his meetings as well as casually with the staff at the council, but he always addresses the international press in French only, because that is what the French people want to see. Behind closed doors, these leaders can speak freely and leave their public persona at the door. Without this privacy, they would likely never get anything done because of political theater and posturing. Decisions within the European Council are made by consensus, meaning all leaders must agree. There are some exceptions, such as the election of its president and for procedural and administrative matters, where a qualified majority is enough. This focus on consensus ensures that decisions reflect a collective agreement, but it also means that any single member state can effectively block any significant decision. This has led to instances where critical issues, such as climate action or migration policy, have stalled due to one or more countries' reluctance to agree. As a result, the European Council is sometimes seen as symbolic of the EU's challenges of balancing European unity with national interests. While unanimity seems absolute, sometimes creative ways are found around it. An interesting situation occurred when the Council voted on starting negotiations with Ukraine on becoming an EU member. While 26 countries were in favor of this, Hungary's Orbán, who has a more friendly relationship with Russia, was not willing to support the decision publicly. To make sure the 26 could get their way and Orbán did not lose face, they came up with a plan. Just at the moment the vote was about to start, Orbán got up and left the room to get a cup of coffee. Since he was not in the room and did not vote, the vote was unanimously in favor, and Orbán could go home saying he had no part in this decision, and probably had a nice deal in his pocket. It is certainly not just Orban and actually quite common in all member states for national leaders to blame Brussels for any unpopular policy on their national political stage, while at the same time claiming the benefits of EU policy as their own achievements. Now that you know that the Council operates by consensus, you'll also recognize that politicians are oftentimes less than honest with their voters at home. Not only were they in the room when the decision was made, each and every one of them had a veto to block it if they would have wanted. The European Council is responsible for shaping the EU's overall strategy and addressing complex or sensitive issues that require consensus at the highest political level. Here's what it typically does. The European Council establishes the EU's broad priorities. For example, it sets goals for economic growth, climate action, or digital transformation. These high-level objectives then inform the work of other EU institutions, such as the European Commission, which drafts policies and legislation to achieve these goals. In the same spirit, the European Council is also the body that handles major constitutional changes, such as amendments to EU treaties. It is also responsible for decisions on new membership applications and potential expansions. While it sets the direction, treaty changes still require the ratification of national parliaments or referenda in member states. The Council's role here is important to keep in mind, as it means the EU's overall direction is still decided by our national leaders as a group, not by an EU politician or bureaucrat. Lastly, the Council is crucial when urgent issues arise, whether financial crises, geopolitical tensions, or health emergencies. The European Council convenes to discuss and decide on a coordinated response. A recent example was its role during the COVID pandemic, where it helped coordinate border closures, economic relief measures, and vaccine distribution. The Council is in the best position to act in these situations, as its members represent the member states as well as the electorate in each of these states. To recap, the European Council is made up of the heads of state or government from each member state, serves as the EU's strategic guide, setting broad policy priorities, managing crises, and addressing key issues like treaty changes and membership applications. It operates primarily by consensus, ensuring collective agreement, but the veto for all sometimes leads to delays on critical decisions. To make deal-making possible, the Council is the only EU body that meets in private and only publishes the final results. The European Council holds a pivotal role in shaping the Union's long-term direction, as well as being tasked with Europe's most pressing challenges, such as crises. If you enjoyed this video and would like to learn more about the EU's institutions, their functions, and how laws are made, be sure to check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel.